Welcome to the Auction Insiders, the property podcast that lifts the lid on everything to do with buying and selling at auction. I'm Louise Stanway.
And I'm Anthony Beeston.
And whether you're a first-time buyer, a seasoned investor, or just auction curious, we're here to share insights, stories, and expert tips from the inside world of UK property auctions. And today's episode is an exciting one for Ant and I because we're introducing our very first guest. And joining us today is Camilla from Together Finance, which is one of the UK's top lending auction finance providers.
Yeah, thanks, Lou. And as you've said, we're delighted to welcome Camilla to the podcast. It's our very first podcast with a guest, so it's new to us all. So thanks again, Camilla, for joining us. And perhaps, Camilla, just start by giving a little bit of information, background in relation to Together Money. Who are you? How long have you been around? That sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So Together Money, we're a specialist lender. It was established in 1974, so we've got over 50 years of experience now, and particularly focusing on auction finance, but we do offer on the market and private sale purchases as well, refinances and second charges.
Excellent. So lots of history and experience there. And obviously, as auctioneers, we work alongside you guys when it comes to referring our buyers of properties who require finance solutions to assist them in purchasing that property. So let's just start by thinking about perhaps benefits to buyers of purchasing a property with finance. What do you think the key benefits are?
So speed is a huge one. Obviously, buying at auction, there is usually a deadline on that, and that deadline can be quite strict. So speed is a massive benefit of using auction finance. Flexibility would be another. So as you're probably aware, there's many different types of properties. The three main reasons why a property goes to auction is usually the 3Ds. So that's death, debt and divorce. So it's not always necessarily the condition of the property.
Yeah.
So lender flexibility is massive, as the standard non-specialist lenders may deem a property as unmortgageable if there's no kitchen or maybe no bathroom, even no roof. But as we know, some of these can be fantastic opportunities to help add value to the properties. Yeah. So I think it's where applying common sense to lending is really, really important. It's definitely an added value of using a dedicated auction lender. And auction finance, I suppose, it just gives the client the ability to scale up. A lot of clients that go to auction may be cash buyers, but why not use the debt as a benefit to scale up? For example, buy more properties or keep your cash aside for some renovation works.
Yeah, I think you make some really key points there, to be honest with you, Killy, because like for us, our with traditional auctions in any event, it's 28-day completions. So that's why we often recommend clients to you, because we know that you can fulfill that for our clients. It's really important, like I say, because it's quite a strict timescale, that we can find a lender that can adhere to those timescales for us. So we find that our clients, they can get it quickly with you guys. Yeah, and I think you make a key point there as well about the strategy side of things, because I think sometimes there's a common misconception with buyers where they think, it's like it's all in, they've got the cash, but actually it's about being creative and using a bit of strategy in terms of trying to grow that portfolio or dream that you have of a property portfolio. To be able to do that, you need to think about finance.
Yeah. And quite often, as you've already alluded to, Camilla, they're not necessarily dilapidated properties that people are buying at auction. There is a reason as to why that individual is selling at auction. And quite often those prospective buyers that come to us do have sizable deposits and are able to raise a traditional mortgage. But sometimes what puts them off proceeding with an auction purchase is the fact that they're not going to be able to raise that traditional mortgage in time to complete within that 28 days.
Yeah.
And I guess that's where, auction finance comes in, doesn't it? Because it's a bit of a stopgap between, buying and then being able to complete up with a traditional mortgage. So it provides an interim solution, doesn't it, for that particular buyer?
Definitely, yeah. Definitely.
Yeah. And I think in terms of when we're recommending yourselves to our clients, more often than not, buyers kind of start asking us questions in terms of kind of what do they need to provide, what's your due diligence. So can you just talk us maybe through the process and what a buyer or an investor would need to show or prove to you in order to get that finance?
Yeah, so due diligence plays a massive role in the auction. It's really important. Give a couple of my main personal views that are probably the the main ones to do before. So the first one would be viewing the property. Go down, see the property, make sure that what you think you're buying is actually what you're buying.
Yeah.
Some customers may want to get a full valuation. This is quite rare, unless maybe they're in the trade themselves. They might want to go down and take a trusted builder with them just to have a look at that property with them.
Yeah, we do get that sometimes.
Yes. Another one would be viewing the legal pack. So this for me is an absolute must. If you don't feel comfortable doing this yourself, you can always get a solicitor to review this on your behalf. But in particular, out of that legal pack, I'd say the special condition of sale, as this may include any additional costs that the purchasers might not necessarily expect. Some things that I've come across most recently would be maybe if the vendor is in arrears, they might be liable to pay for those. They may be liable to pay for the vendor's legal costs. And these extra costs may sometimes run into thousands. So as an unexpected cost, it'd always be nice to know up front before you sign the contract and you're saddled in with that property.
We can't drill that enough. I mean, if you've listened to our previous podcast before, listeners, both Anna and I have said multiple times in the legal pack, it's so key and imperative that people are reading those.
Yeah. Definitely. Another one I'd probably say would be if you're buying a leasehold property, just to check how long's left on that lease. So short lease properties can sometimes become a bit of a challenge with certain lenders.
Yeah.
Now, at Together, we can consider short lease properties, but it is always important that the purchaser knows that, how long's left on it before they buy that property.
Yeah, and the impact on valuation, I'm guessing, as well, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So they might think they're getting a bargain, but then they might not be able to finance it anywhere because it's got such a short lease.
Yeah.
Another thing would be to check the tenancies. So a lot of them at auction, they might be vacant, so this might not be a problem. But if it has got a tenant in there and then it may be a sitting tenant, just double check if that's a regulated tenancy, because most lenders don't like regulated tenancies. It might just be your standard a short hold tenancy, which is great, but just double check that one as well. Finally, I'd say check your completion date. So don't just assume that all auction purchases are 28 days. I know that is the most common, but some of them could be 14, some may even be 56.
Yeah, so just don't be caught out on that, do you?
Yeah, don't get caught out.
I mean, I think the key message that I take from that, Camilla, is that, buyers need to do the homework.
Yeah.
It's all right having a look at a property listing and thinking, yeah, this is for me. But obviously there are potential pitfalls to be aware of. And by doing that due diligence at an early stage and before proceeding is obviously key, isn't it? Because once you buy a property at auction, whether or not you're the highest bid of an auction day or you've made a pre-auction offer, you're effectively you are under contract. So, there's no opportunity then to do the due diligence that one would ordinarily do if they were buying on the open market. So, as much information that you can obtain from the pack and inquiries and perhaps valuations and so on is key. Yeah, I think that's what we can take from that.
You never know too much about a property.
Quite exactly. So following on from that then, perhaps you can just walk us through the process of securing auction finance and what steps investors and buyers should take before they actually place their bid.
Yeah, so firstly, identify your property. Find one that you're interested in, find one that you think you're going to bid for. Secondly, as we've just been through, do your due diligence. Thirdly, what I'd say is get a decision in principle. So Together we can do this in minutes. We get some customers coming to us the day of the auction, panicking that they've not got a decision in principle, but we can still look to help them. Get a decision in principle, because that will check affordability if it's required. Some may do a soft credit search, which doesn't affect your credit position, but obviously it's good to know that the lender's happy with that before you go ahead. And if applicable, they'll probably do a desktop valuation on it. So you can get to a bit of an idea of what that valuation's coming at before you go to the auction. And that will then put you in a position to start the bidding. If you are unsuccessful, you will just simply let us know. We can cancel the application. There's no fees involved in a decision in principle. So you just cancel the application, hopefully keep our details for next time. And if you go to look at another one, you can come back to us and we'll do it again. If, of course, you are successful, once we've got all the documentation that's required from yourself, we would just endeavour to get the legal documents out to their solicitor. And this is usually done within 24 hours. From there, we just need everything back from solicitors ready for completion.
Brilliant.
Excellent.
And I think, to be honest with you, there's a little gold nugget just in there. And you are right. Getting that decision in principle allows you then, I think, to go into an auction with your eyes wide open, knowing what you can afford and what to go up to, knowing what the valuations are. I think that's key.
Yeah, it helps with bidders' confidence, doesn't it? If you feel that you've got the lender backing you,
Yeah.
makes the whole experience a bit more, you're
Hugely.
confident yourself and a bit more exciting, I
Yeah,
suppose.
so it's a good point there. Absolutely, I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah.
And then in terms then of potential buyers, like what should a potential buyer know about the costs involved in auction? I mean, it's something we get asked all the time. You put me in touch with Together, and I'm going through auction finance. It's going to cost me X amount more money. Would you be able to kind of maybe give us an indication on fees for buyers and what they can expect to pay for auction finance?
Yeah, absolutely. So with us, there would always be an arrangement fee for the loan. So there's always going to be that arrangement fee and your monthly rate of interest. There'd be a small title indemnity fee, which this just offers an extra layer of protection. And then the client will have their own legal fees, that's their own solicitor.
Yeah.
Something that is quite unique with Together is that there's no lender's legal fees.
I was just about to ask that question, but you've covered it there. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So there's no lender's legal fees. Now, this only applies to properties in England and Wales.
Yeah.
Sadly, we can't do it on Scottish properties. But in England and Wales, we'll do something called dual representation.
Okay.
Now, what that is it's where your solicitor, so the client solicitor, will act on behalf of the client, but also us, the lender.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So it helps to speed everything up because obviously there's only one solicitor acting on both sides rather than two waiting on each other. But it also saves the client money because they don't have to pay any lender's legal fees, which is quite a USP with Together. Not many lenders do that. Another would be the no valuation fees. So on your typical residential property, there'd be no valuation fees. We would run a desktop valuation, which is a systemised valuation that just works off comparables.
Yeah.
And most of the time, they're brilliant, they stack up, and they're easy to use, so we will use that. Again, not only saving the client time, which is vital in an auction purchase, but also money as well, because they're not having to pay for a valuation if they don't want to.
Yeah, makes sense.
Lastly, there would be no exit fees and this only applies to loans over 100,000. There'd be no exit fees, so you can exit at any point with no exit penalty. With our auction finance, there is no minimum, so you can exit at any point. If it only takes you 3 months to do the works, you can exit. If it only takes you 6, you can exit. You don't always have to use the full 12. So just to give an example of a typical residential property then to help some people understand, let's just assume you've got a loan amount of 150,000.
Yep.
There would then be a £3,000 arrangement fee with that.
And is that a fixed fee or is that on a percentage?
So that's based off a percentage. That's 2% of the net loan amount.
Okie doke.
Yeah. And does that include VAT, or is that added onto that?
No, so it's not. It's just the 3,000. There's no
Okay.
VAT.
Yep. No, that's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. There would be a £100 title insurance fee. It just covers any defects on the title, adds that extra layer of protection. And roughly, based off a monthly interest rate of 1% a month. Now, that is just rough. It does differ depending on the loan that you've got, depending on the loan to value and things like that. But based off that, it'd be £1,500 a month.
Okay.
Yes.
There's no broker fees, no lender's legal fees, no valuation fees, and no exit fees.
Yeah, so it's quite refreshing really just to see that there's no lender's legal fees or exit fees actually. It does then stack up, doesn't it, for people, I think, at that stage.
Yeah, definitely. One thing I would highlight, I suppose, is when you're comparing lenders, it's always important to look at the fees. Now, somebody's headline rate might be higher than others, but the person with the lower headline rate might be charging quite a lot of fees, and therefore when you weigh up the cost over the term of the loan, actually the one with the higher headline rate might be the cheaper lender overall.
Yeah. I mean, just like it is with traditional mortgages, isn't it? That if there are product fees, you've got to factor that into the overall cost of the borrowing.
Yeah.
And I know you mentioned there, Camilla, that these loans can be repaid at any point, up to a maximum of 12 months. Am I right in thinking that the term is 12 months from the date of drawdown, but that borrowers can repay it earlier if their circumstances allow without penalty.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. So those individuals who are perhaps buying a, let's call it a non-typical auction property for now, and they have a good credit rating and they're confident that they can raise traditional mortgage finance against that property within a reasonable period of time. Once that mortgage is in place, they're then able to repay the auction finance without penalty.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really useful.
Yeah, so that.
Okay, so thank you for that. And we've obviously talked earlier about typical auction properties, and I think the market's changing there. We've certainly seen that, haven't we, Lou, with regards to the types of properties that are coming onto the market for sale by auction.
Yeah, massive.
Gone are the days where they are, those dilapidated properties that nobody else will buy. We've got some lovely turnkey properties that are listed for sale by auction because the circumstances of that vendor require a quick sale and require that certainty that auction provides. But just moving on from that, Camilla, do you think there are any particular types of properties that are best suited for auction financing?
Every type of property, everyone.
Yeah.
So I suppose it's only fair that I actually define that. So 89% of properties are residential properties at auction, with your average sale price being roughly 160,000. So it's all fairly straightforward, bread and butter acquisitions. You'll see a lot of 2, 3 bed, semi-detached, terrace houses, for an example. But don't get me wrong there, because I have seen some weird and wonderful auction properties. As an example, we can lend on a piece of land that's got no planning on, or an industrial unit. We've even lent on a former public toilet building.
Right, okay, that sounds interesting.
Although rare, the bulk of what we do, obviously, as already mentioned, is residential.
Yeah.
But not forgetting, the flats as well. There is some really weird and wonderful properties in auction, and there's definitely a growth in commercial opportunities that's going up at auction at the minute. So
Yeah, we've noticed
just say watch this space.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, we see, and certainly the stats that we receive are suggesting that auction is a growing area of certainly the residential sales market. From a lender's perspective, are you seeing the same trend?
Yes. Our auction team together consists of 6 members of staff. Now, 4 years ago when I started, that only had 2 members of staff. So it is growing massively. It's really, really grown. We're seeing a bigger trend, not only in people buying from auction for investment, but also to live in.
Yeah.
We're seeing more people
You're
come
absolutely
to
right.
us saying they want to buy it to renovate that house, and then they're going to move there. So it's not always about going to auction to get that investment to make money necessarily. There's a lot of properties out there that people would love to buy to live in. So it's not just your standard. I suppose the stigmas around auction now are sort of breaking down because there's so many different properties, different buyers. We've seen an increase in women in property buying it from auction that you wouldn't necessarily have seen maybe a decade or so ago. So every sort of, it seems to start to be breaking all of the stigmas. It's, the around auction at the moment, you can't really expect. You have to expect the unexpected, I suppose, with it.
Sorry, I was going to say, I can agree more with all of that, really. And I think it's the opportunities that are there now, aren't they, across the market for seasoned investors or first-time buyers even. That's what we're noticing with some of our auctions, which is, it's great.
Yeah.
It is definitely, like you say, those sort of traditional stereotypical properties that one would associate with being for sale at
But
auction.
I suppose it's kind of why we've done what we've done, though, isn't it, Ant? Because, like you say, it's breaking down the stigma of auctions, but it's educating people not to be scared of auctions.
Yeah.
Yeah, this was kind of like the thought behind what we were doing, because we're trying to, get the message across to everybody and anybody that's just interested in property, they're looking for the next purchase. This is a channel or a method of sale that actually it provides you with the transparency, it provides you with the speed, it provides you with that certainty that you don't often get with private treaty, which is why I think a lot of people are turning to it.
Yeah. And as we are able to educate people on, auction properties and the benefits of buying and selling at auction, sometimes the challenge is, well, I need the cash quickly, and that's obviously where you and your company can come in, because as you've explained, that those decisions on finance can be turned around really quickly, and it gives that purchaser the option to buy that property that they really want. Then they don't
Yeah, I think you both make some really good points there on that. Obviously, like you said, Louise, the certainty of an auction, you don't always get that when you're buying on the market. You could get, somebody puts in a higher offer and you get gazumped and things like that. With auction, when that gavel falls, it's yours.
Yes.
You exchange, you've got that certainty. So I think, as long as the purchaser has trust in their lender and their solicitor, and obviously themselves to get that over the line in the time frame, it doesn't have to be scary. Like this auction has, buying an auction has got that sort of stereotype of being a bit scary, something that quite a few people might avoid because of how quick it moves. Actually, that could be a huge benefit and play in your favour.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. No, I agree, and as you've said, it removes the risk of gazumping for buyers, and obviously it removes the risk of fall through for sellers. And I think in the private
Super
treaty,
attractive, isn't it?
it is, yeah, because I think the private treaty market, the last stats I read, 1 in 3